Hello and welcome to HITC Sport. Right, I think we can all agree that VAR is not going according to plan. From minuscule offside calls to penalties softer than a bit of French cheese you left out in the sun, the use of video assisted referees has slowed down the game and created chaos across the Premier League. And that's before we even get to the week at the start of the season where all you had to do was think about having hands and you gave away a penalty for handball. But what would have happened if VAR had been brought in years ago? I'm going to look at some of the most iconic moments from football history and look at how VAR would have changed them completely. Number 1. Thierry Henry's handball against Ireland. It's been covered to death on this channel over the past few years. If you listen closely you can still hear my good man crying himself to sleep, and that's before the Grealish and Rice nightmares kick in. But to be fair, what happened to Ireland on November 18th, 2009 was absolutely scandalous. The Irish had the unenviable task of facing France for a place at the 2010 World Cup, just years after their opponents were beaten in the 2006 final by Italy, when Zinedine Zidane headbutted the soul out of Marco Materazzi. Ireland looked like they had no chance, yet they were in extra time with the second leg staring a penalty shootout right in the face. Then chaos descended as the French scored one of the most controversial goals you'll ever see. Henry basically catches the ball to keep it in play, then finds William Gallas to score the winner. It was one of the most blatant handballs you'll ever see, and a goal that ensures that whenever you travel to Ireland nowadays, border control ask if you've got any strong opinions about Arsenal's record goal scorer. Even without the handball, Squalachi was offside in the build-up, so VAR would have had a field day. If VAR was there back in 2009, this goal never would have counted, and perhaps Ireland could have held on for penalties and qualified for the 2010 World Cup. Then we all could have been treated to a sea of green, white and orange vuvuzelas, with a bunch of blokes using them as funnels for their Guinness habits. But it wasn't all bad for Ireland. At least they got some hush money off the French, and it helped them pay for the Aviva Stadium that played host to the likes of Michael Bublé, Robbie Williams and Rihanna. And Thierry Henry got backstage passes for each and every single one of them. Number 2. Newcastle's 4-4 draw with Arsenal. We've looked at how VAR could have changed the life of my colleague for the better, and now let's look how it could have changed my life for the worse. Well, that's a bit steep. Losing to Arsenal that day wouldn't have changed my life. But Newcastle's 4-4 comeback against Arsenal will always be the greatest game I've ever seen. But if VAR had been around that day, I don't think we would have seen it happen. We've seen soft penalties given during the VAR era, but even with a bloke sat in front of a camera micro-analysing every single little event in a football game, I don't even think he could have found a foul on Mike Williamson in the second half. The towering centre-back hit the deck after a long cross into the box, and Phil Dow just pointed at the spot as if he was Hulk Hogan hulking up. It was never a penalty, and VAR surely would have overturned that. That would have left the score at 4-2, and Newcastle unlikely to set up a grand slam finish that saw Czech THIERRY score a thunderous volley that still gives me goosebumps to this day. Number 3. Sunderland's beach ball goal versus Liverpool. One of the Premier League's more comical goals came back in 2009, back when Sunderland were actually trying to be a half-decent team rather than a Netflix laughingstock. Steve Bruce of all people had the Black Cats thriving, and a 1-0 win over Liverpool at the Stadium Light was far from a shock. However, the winner probably wouldn't have been possible had it not been down to a little boy in a strange obsession with inflatable objects. He battered a beach ball onto the Sunderland turf, only for Darren Bent to cannon his shot directly at it as it spun off the inflatable and into the back of the net past a somewhat confused Pepe Reina. The young lad's beach ball had cost his beloved Liverpool, and no doubt kicked off years of abuse on the playground back on Merseyside. Had that moment happened now though, the little beach ball boy would have nothing to cry about, as VAR would have chalked off the goal because it involved an outside agent. Darren Bent's Premier League tally would be 1 goal less, and the National Football Museum would have to explain why they've got a random beach ball kicking about. Number 4. The 2010 World Cup Final. The 2010 World Cup Final saw Andres Iniesta complete a dream and hand his country their first ever World Cup. It was a golden era for Spanish football, but sadly for them the 2010 World Cup final is better remembered as a bloodbath rather than a game of football. Howard Webb was the referee, and he had the whole thing as under control as Boris Johnson managing a pandemic. Tackles were flying in, yellow cards were being dished out like sweets from a creepy bloke in a van, and the 2010 World Cup final became more of a death match than a game of football. But one tackle, and if you can call it that, in particular, should have received a greater punishment. The fact that Nigel de Jong could kick Xavi Alonso square in the chest with the studs and stay on the pitch was absolutely comical. Considering nowadays you just have to breathe on someone the wrong way to get a red card, de Jong would have been lucky to get away with a lifetime ban rather than a prison sentence. Howard Webb would have been told to go to the screen and de Jong would have been sent for an early bath. Spain still would have gone on to win, but at least their triumph would have been overshadowed by a bro kick that was heard around the world. Number 5. HENRIKH MKHITARYAN'S scorpion kick. As far as Premier League goals go, this has to be up there with one of the best ever. It was an absolutely audacious strike from HENRIKH MKHITARYAN, fanning the net with a scorpion kick against Sunderland in 2016. There was one issue though, despite it being a beautiful goal that got you up and out of your feet, the Man United man was about a mile offside. The The reason he had so much space and had to flick the ball from behind was because he'd wandered offside like a lost child in a supermarket. But the flag didn't go up and the commentators didn't seem to care because the goal was so good. But Olivier Giroud cares because he scored an even better goal not long after that and constantly gets compared to Mkhitaryan. Giroud's goal was better and it was legal, so if VAR had been in place, the Frenchman would have no competition for the greatest scorpion kick goal ever. Number 6, Frank Lampard's 2010 World Cup goal. Just think how different the 2010 World Cup would have been had Frank Lampard's ghost goal been given. I mean, it was so far over the line, it was basically in Austria. Had the goal been given, England could have gone all the way. We would have beaten Germany and became 2-time World Cup winners. Or we would have just lost by a less embarrassing scoreline. People still whinge and moan about the Lampard goal that never was, and with VAR then it would have counted. But honestly, it wouldn't have made an ounce of difference. If anything, it would have put more eyes on a woeful England performance rather than blaming a referee for not giving a goal. Number 7, Arsenal's Invincibles. The Arsenal Invincibles are one of the most iconic teams ever. No one else in Premier League history has gone a full season unbeaten. While they haven't won the title since, Arsenal can still say they've done something that no one else has ever done. But my word, they were lucky VAR wasn't kicking about in 2003, otherwise Portsmouth would have handed them a big fat L and cost them their chance at immortality. Pompey went 1-0 up at Highbury before THIERRY got a chance to equalise from the spot. It came after a foul on Robert Pires, but when you look back, it was the kind of dive that would get you a gold medal at the Olympics. Honestly, Tom Daly's got posters of Robert Pires on his wall. From the replays, you could clearly see that Pires had taken a tumble, and VAR would have ensured that that penalty was revoked and Pires got a card for his troubles. And quite possibly, Portsmouth would have gone on to be the only team to beat Arsenal in the 2003-2004 campaign, and Arsenal would have to come up with more stats like this to cling on to relevancy. Number 8, the 1966 World Cup Final. It's a year that cannot be forgotten in England. Even if you don't like football, you probably know that 1966 is the year that England won the World Cup. It was the first and only time that England have won it, and it's a game that becomes more and more meaningful each time the Three Lions fail at a major tournament. It put a star on the England shirt and gave the Gammons the chant of 2 World Wars and 1 World Cup, doodah, doodah. But what if there was no World Cup? Because really, England got away with one that day. Geoff Hurst scored a perfect hat-trick according to the record books. The only issue is that his second clearly didn't cross the line. Yet the officials decided to give it and England went on to win 4-2. This team lived on in infamy, but if VAR was around in 66, then maybe we wouldn't have won it at all. And then what would we brag about? I mean, look how over the top we went just getting to the semis in 2018 via the easiest route possible. Southgate probably would have got a statue just for getting at the Final Four. Number 9, the playoff semi-final between Leicester and Watford in 2013. It was a game that saw Harry Kane play for Leicester and Jamie Vardy sit on the bench, but the 2013 Championship playoff semi is better known for one of the craziest passages of football England has ever seen. The game is heading for extra time, then Leicester get a penalty. Knockaert takes it, Almunia saves it, and suddenly Watford are on the break. Next thing you know, the ball's in the net at the other end and Troy Deeney is sending Watford to the playoff final. It's a clip that has been repeated time and time again, and it's a moment that wouldn't have existed in the world of VAR. Knockaert won the penalty for Leicester, but on closer inspection, it was never a spot kick. Unless there was a sniper up in the stands, the only thing sending Knockaert over was a strong gust of wind and his desire to win a spot kick. Had VAR delayed things, brought a moment of calm at Vicarage Road, the penalty wouldn't have been given, and Watford probably wouldn't have gone up the other end and scored. Maybe Leicester could have won and end up sealing promotion themselves. Maybe it could have stopped them from going on to win the Premier League in 2016. If that hadn't happened, then the Jamie Vardy lookalike would just be sat at home with the Sean Longstaff and Ashley Westwood doppelgangers fighting through the papers to get some work. Just one moment could have changed the future of football, but thank goodness there was no VAR here, as it was a moment that lives on forever, and actually ended up doing Leicester a favour. And number 10, the Hand of God. We've had plenty of World Cup controversy, but for England fans there is no goal more controversial than this one. It's a goal that Peter Shilton is still bitter about, even though he should be more concerned by the fact he got outjumped by a man half his size. The Diego Maradona Hand of God was a goal that tarnished his legacy forever in England, but realistically, it just gives us something to whinge about after getting beaten by the better team. That game should be better remembered for Maradona's solo goal, as he galloped through the entire country's population to score one of the greatest goals ever seen. If VAR was there in 1986, Maradona's Hand of God would never have been given, but thank goodness it was, as it led to world-class content like this. So there we go, there was a 10 iconic moments in football that VAR would have changed forever. Let me know in the comments below if you've got any more. I know there's loads more. The 2002 World Cup was littered with controversy. There's been Champions League moments with Chelsea and Barcelona. Let me know what you think is the most controversial. What would have changed football the most? But until next time, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to HITC Sport. You can follow me on Twitter, I'm at HITC James. And until next time, we will see you around.